Welcome, the Lord's chosen. There are moments in life when doing nothing is the loudest move you'll ever make. That's the energy we're stepping into today. A territory where patience isn't passive, it's predatory. Where the calm you carried so effortlessly wasn't softness, but strategy. And the funniest part? Most people never notice they're walking into a trap when the trap is silent, polite, and smiling. See, psychological studies show that humans reveal more truth in long periods of calm than in moments of conflict, meaning the minute you stopped reacting, they started unraveling. Some of them unraveled so fast you could swear they were auditioning for a telenovela. Others tried to pretend nothing was happening while their lives were glitching like a cheap Wi-Fi connection. And here's where it gets interesting. Your patience, the very thing they mocked, measured, and misinterpreted, became the invisible boundary that exposed every intention they thought they had perfectly hidden. They thought you were letting it slide, not realizing you were letting them dig. You weren't losing time, you were letting time do the work. This is the beauty of being a chosen one. You don't have to shout, scheme, or sprint. You simply stand still long enough for truth to trip over its own shoelaces and land right at your feet. And trust me, some of the people who underestimated you are face down in consequences right now, wondering how they managed to trap themselves without you lifting a single holy finger. So today, we're diving into why your patience wasn't weakness. It was the quiet architecture of their downfall. And by the end, you'll understand exactly how they ended up stuck in the very web they thought they were spinning around you. Let's begin. Number one, your patience forced them to reveal who they really were, not who they pretended to be. People can keep up an act for a moment, maybe even for a season, but no one can perform forever. Your patience stretched the timeline long enough for the truth to leak through the cracks of their behavior. At first, they showed you their best version, polished, controlled, and eager to impress. But when you didn't rush, when you didn't force anything, when you simply observed without reacting, the performance became too heavy for them to maintain. That's when the real person slipped out, not in one dramatic moment, but in tiny inconsistencies that slowly exposed everything. Patience has a way of removing the stage and turning life into an unfiltered camera. People who rely on pretending can't survive that kind of exposure. They start contradicting themselves. They reveal motives they tried to hide. They show you where their values end and where their impulses begin. The longer you stayed steady, the clearer everything became, almost like watching fog lift from a window. You didn't have to investigate or confront anyone. You just allowed time to do what your anger never needed to. What made this even more powerful was that you weren't trying to trap anyone. You were simply being genuine. You showed up consistently, and your consistency highlighted their lack of it. They wanted you to break first so their behavior wouldn't be so noticeable. But when you remained calm, grounded, and patient, their own character began fighting against their pretending. They couldn't keep up with the version of themselves they wanted you to believe in. It's funny how people reveal themselves not in pressure, but in the absence of it. When you gave them space, they didn't evolve. They exposed. Your patience stripped away the mask they held with shaky hands, and once it fell, they couldn't pick it back up. They showed you who they were without realizing it, and now they're caught in the consequences of the truth they tried so hard to hide. Number two, by not reacting, you became the mirror they were afraid to look into. There's a certain kind of power that comes when you don't match someone's chaos. When you refuse to argue, panic, chase, or defend yourself unnecessarily, it forces the other person to deal with something far more uncomfortable than your words, their own reflection. People who thrive on drama expect you to respond in a way that distracts them from themselves. They depend on your reaction to shift attention away from their behavior. But when you stay calm, when you don't feed the moment, The spotlight stays right where they never wanted it, on them. Your lack of reaction didn't mean you were ignoring what they did. It meant you were giving them no place to hide. They couldn't use your anger as an excuse. They couldn't twist your words. They couldn't claim you were overreacting. All that was left was their behavior, standing alone, unprotected and obvious. That's a mirror most people pray they never have to face. You didn't hold this mirror intentionally. You held it simply by refusing to lower yourself to match their dysfunction. And that drove them wild, not because they wanted your reaction, but because they needed it to avoid accountability. When you remained steady, their guilt and insecurities had nowhere to go but inward. They felt exposed, even if you didn't say a single word. This is why some people became distant, defensive, or even angry when you didn't respond the way they expected. They weren't hurt by your silence. They were confronted by themselves. Your composure highlighted their instability. Your peace highlighted their chaos. Your maturity highlighted their immaturity. You didn't attack them, yet they felt attacked. That's the power of being a mirror. It forces truth without force. In the end, your calm didn't just protect your energy, it revealed their character. They had to sit with themselves long enough to realize the problem wasn't you. It was the person they became when they could no longer blame your reaction for their actions. Number 3, your restraint activated consequences they thought they'd outsmart. When someone acts without considering the long term, they often assume life will bend to their whims. They believe their shortcuts, manipulations, and schemes can bypass reality. But your restraint disrupted that illusion. By holding back, by refusing to react impulsively, you didn't just maintain your integrity, you let natural consequences line up perfectly behind their actions. They thought they could play the game faster than life's timing, but patience is a silent enforcer, and it never misses. Your restraint wasn't weakness, it was strategic. Every time they tried to provoke you, every attempt to push your buttons and every action meant to destabilize you, you resisted. That resistance allowed the effects of their own decisions to compound, and slowly, inevitably, those effects started catching up. They weren't aware of it at first. They were so focused on how you weren't moving in the way they expected that they failed to notice how their own choices were closing in. Life started correcting itself around them, aligning events and opportunities in ways they couldn't manipulate. There's a subtle cruelty in restraint that people rarely understand. It doesn't hit instantly, it doesn't create immediate drama, but over time it exposes patterns and consequences that no one can argue with. Their overconfidence became the engine of their own undoing. They acted as if patience meant submission, never realizing that while they were busy trying to force outcomes, you were allowing reality to quietly do its work. Every misstep, every lie, every attempt to cheat the natural order became a stepping stone in the trap they didn't see forming. In the end, your restraint gave them no excuses and no scapegoats. They couldn't blame anyone else because the chain reaction was entirely of their own making. You didn't rush justice, you didn't seek revenge, and you didn't manipulate the results. You simply stood firm, and life, in all its precision, delivered the lesson they thought they could escape. And now they're learning that the patient are often the ones who control the outcome, even when it looks like nothing is happening. Number 4, your calm dismantled their illusion of control. People who rely on manipulation don't actually have real power. They only have influence when things are messy. Their entire advantage comes from confusion, emotional reactions, and quick decisions made under pressure. The moment you stayed calm, you removed the one ingredient they needed most: chaos. Without that chaos, their strategies had nothing to grip onto. Their tactics became useless, their timing fell apart, and their confidence cracked because they realized they couldn't pull you into the emotional storm they were trying to create. Manipulators expect you to snap, panic, defend yourself, or fall for their guilt-tripping. They're trained for drama, not stability. When you didn't react, they lost their footing. They couldn't predict your next move, and they definitely couldn't control the conversation. Your calm made them face the uncomfortable truth that their influence only works on people who are unsettled. You weren't unsettled, and that left them scrambling. Your calm wasn't just silence. It was a form of strength they didn't know how to handle. It signaled that you're not someone who can be persuaded by fear, pressure, or emotional tricks. It meant you can think for yourself. And nothing scares a manipulator more than someone who thinks clearly. Once they realized their usual methods weren't getting a reaction from you, they had to deal with something they never expected: the collapse of their own plan. Their illusion of control depended on you believing they had power. The moment you remained grounded, their illusion shattered. They tried harder, pushing buttons that no longer worked. They repeated behaviors that used to affect you but now fell flat. You were no longer feeding the cycle, and without your participation, the entire structure of manipulation fell apart. In the end, your calm didn't just protect your peace, it exposed their weakness. They weren't strong, they were simply loud. They weren't in control. They were just hoping you wouldn't notice how fragile their influence really was. By staying calm, you showed them the one truth they never wanted to face. The only power they ever had was the power you stopped giving them. Number 5. Your patience exposed what their urgency was trying to hide. People who move too fast aren't always confident. Sometimes they're terrified. Urgency can look like passion, ambition, or eagerness. But when you look closely, it often comes from fear. Fear of being seen, fear of being questioned, fear of their true intentions slipping out. They rush because slowing down would force them to face themselves, and that's the one thing they're not prepared for. Your patience disrupted their entire rhythm. While they were trying to speed through situations, force outcomes, and make decisions before anyone could think clearly, you stayed steady. You didn't match their pace. You didn't get swept into their timelines. You didn't panic just because they did. And that slow, steady presence made everything they were trying to hide rise to the surface. People who are hiding something depend on pressure. They rely on rushing you so you don't ask questions, notice inconsistencies, or connect the dots. But when you patiently observed, those dots connected themselves. Their explanations started sounding rehearsed. Their actions started contradicting their words. Their stories didn't align because they were too focused on maintaining speed, not truth. The funny thing is that you didn't expose them. They exposed themselves by trying to outrun exposure. Your patience made their movements stand out too sharply to ignore. Every time they tried to hurry you, it highlighted how uncomfortable they were with transparency. Every time they pushed for quick decisions, it revealed how fragile their intentions were. Their rush became the spotlight they were trying to avoid. And the moment you didn't move at their pace, they started slipping. Not because you trapped them, but because truth can't keep up with lies when there's no pressure. Their mask didn't fall off because you snatched it. It fell because they were running so fast it couldn't stay on. By waiting, you learned everything you needed to know without confrontation. Their urgency became their confession. Their speed became their downfall. And your patience became the quiet force that revealed exactly who they were when they thought no one was paying attention. Number 6, you became the variable they underestimated in their own downfall. Some people think they're smarter than everyone around them. They plan, scheme, predict, and calculate, believing they can control the outcome because they've already decided how everyone will respond. They assume you'll react the same way every time, that you'll be predictable, emotional, or easy to steer. But what they didn't expect was the one move they could never prepare for: your stillness. Stillness doesn't look powerful at first. It looks quiet, gentle, maybe even passive. But stillness carries a strength most people don't understand. It means you're not operating from fear. It means you don't need to prove anything. It means you can sit calmly in moments others would panic in. And that kind of steadiness is the one factor manipulators never put into their calculations. They studied your past, not realizing your growth had updated your entire operating system. They assumed you'd react like the old you, not knowing they were dealing with someone who had already evolved beyond their strategy. Their downfall began the moment they made plans based on outdated assumptions. They prepared for arguments. You gave them silence. They expected you to chase. You stayed centered. They thought you'd panic. You remained grounded. And with every unexpected move you didn't make, their confidence cracked a little more. Because once stillness enters the equation, everything unstable collapses. Stillness forces people to confront the weakness of their own plans. They can't manipulate time when you're not rushing. They can't manipulate emotion when you're not reacting. They can't manipulate perspective when you're seeing everything clearly. You became the unpredictable element, the shift they didn't see coming, the calm presence that made their entire strategy malfunction. What they didn't realize is that stillness doesn't mean doing nothing. It means letting everything around you reveal itself. It means allowing truth to rise without your interference. And because they never accounted for that level of control, they walked straight into outcomes they thought they were avoiding. You didn't cause their downfall. You simply stopped participating in their plans. And once you stepped out of the game, the whole thing fell apart on top of them, all because they underestimated the power of someone who refuses to be predictable. Number 7. Your gentleness forced life to deliver the lesson they thought you'd never assign. Gentleness is often misunderstood. People think it's a weakness, a lack of fire, or an inability to act. But in reality, gentleness carries a quiet authority. It doesn't push, it doesn't yell, and it doesn't seek revenge. It simply moves through life with clarity, letting the universe handle what you don't need to touch. And for those who tried to manipulate or harm you, this kind of gentleness is a nightmare, because it forces consequences to come from life itself, not from your hand. You didn't punish them, and that's what made it so effective. Every misstep they took, every lie, every attempt to control the outcome was met not with retaliation, but with a calm that left them exposed. Life became the teacher, and the curriculum was tailored to their own choices. Every consequence was perfectly aligned with the errors they made. And because you stayed gentle, it looked effortless. The irony is sharp. They assumed you would react, that you would fight back, that you would somehow orchestrate their downfall. Instead, life did it for you. And it did it with precision that no personal vendetta could match. Gentleness removes the distraction of emotion from the equation. It doesn't inflame situations or escalate conflict. It allows patterns to reveal themselves naturally. And when you combine that with patience, it becomes unstoppable. The very actions they thought they could hide were amplified by the calm you carried. Their mistakes became unavoidable because you didn't intervene to soften the blow or obscure the truth. You just moved steadily, and the universe adjusted accordingly. What they didn't see coming is that gentleness can feel like invisibility, but it's actually a form of mastery. You let the world teach them the lessons they thought only you could assign. And the most satisfying part is that it doesn't feel personal. It's not about vengeance. It's about balance, cause and effect, and letting reality enforce what ego and deception tried to escape. In the end, your gentleness wasn't a lack of action. It was the ultimate strategic force, one that delivered justice without effort and allowed their own decisions to trap them perfectly. Number 8. Your refusal to lower your standards became the boundary they ran face first into. People who try to manipulate or take advantage of others always assume they'll find a weak spot. They look for a crack in your armor, a moment of compromise, a point where your values or boundaries can be bent to fit their agenda. They expect you to give in at some point, to justify, explain, or rationalize why it's okay this time. But when you refuse to lower your standards, you don't give them that option. You don't have to argue, defend, or enforce your limits. You simply live by them, and that alone becomes an unmovable boundary. They misread this as rigidity or stubbornness at first. They push harder, test limits, and expect to see cracks. But what they find instead is consistency. Your standards aren't negotiable because they aren't performative. They aren't something you broadcast to impress or intimidate. They are the natural rhythm of your life, the choices you make without thinking twice. And because of that, the pressure they apply doesn't bend you, it bends them. The irony is brutal. They go into every encounter expecting to find leverage, only to collide with something they can't move. They exhaust themselves trying to twist, manipulate, or pressure, thinking eventually you'll compromise. And while they struggle to control the situation, your life continues smoothly around them. They don't realize they aren't facing resistance. They're facing a reflection of the reality they refuse to respect. Their attempts to bend your principles only make them stumble over their own inconsistency. This is the kind of boundary that doesn't need enforcement. It doesn't require confrontation or proof. It exists in every choice you make, every standard you uphold, and every line you refuse to cross. They aren't defeated by strategy, cleverness, or confrontation. They're defeated by the simple fact that your standards are non-negotiable and effortless to maintain. You didn't break. They did. And they did it entirely on their own, running headfirst into a boundary they never anticipated, because it wasn't imposed, it was lived. Number 9, your patience bought you clarity, but it sold them exposure. Patience isn't just waiting, it's watching. It's holding space long enough for the truth to reveal itself without forcing it, for patterns to show up naturally, and for intentions to surface quietly over time. While most people rush to act, manipulate, or react, you stood steady. And in that steadiness, you gained something they could never touch. Clarity. You saw the pieces fall into place, the motives line up, the contradictions stack themselves neatly. Every hidden agenda, every lie, every act of self-interest revealed itself, not through confrontation, but through the passage of time. Meanwhile, your patience wasn't neutral for them. Every delay, every refusal to react, every moment you held your ground became a lens through which they exposed themselves. They didn't realize it, but by trying to control, provoke, or mislead you while you remained calm, they were effectively writing the story of their own unraveling. Their masks slipped, their pretenses faltered, and their calculated moves began to look desperate. The very behaviors they thought were hidden became glaringly obvious, fully visible because you weren't adding noise or reaction to cover them up. And then, when the moment was right, when life aligned and truth had matured fully, it ripened perfectly. The clarity you'd been holding for yourself collided with the exposure they had created for themselves. Suddenly, the consequences, the realizations, the recognition of their own errors fell squarely into their hands. They got the full view of what they had done, how they had maneuvered, and how wrong they had been in underestimating you. Your patience wasn't passive, it was transformative. It turned observation into insight, calm into strategy, and time into a force that revealed the hidden and corrected the misguided. You didn't have to act to prove anything. The universe, guided by your steadiness, handled the exposure while giving you the clarity to move forward with certainty. In the end, they were fully visible, fully accountable, and fully caught, all because you chose to wait, watch, and remain unwavering. Number 10. They confused your patience with weakness, but it was actually evidence of evolution. People often assume that if you're not reacting, you're afraid. If you're not arguing, you're intimidated. If you're not responding on their level, you don't know what's going on. But your patience wasn't helplessness. It was growth. It was you stepping into a version of yourself that doesn't waste energy on battles that don't matter anymore. They were busy trying to provoke the old you, the one who felt the need to explain, defend, justify, or fix everything. But that version of you is long gone. The real shift happened quietly. You outgrew chaos. You outgrew overreacting. You outgrew the urge to prove yourself to people who were committed to misunderstanding you. And because you didn't announce your growth, they never updated their assumptions. They approached you with old tactics, thinking you'd fall for the same traps and triggers. But the upgraded you didn't respond the way they remembered. You were calm where you used to be emotional. You were clear where you used to be confused. You were steady where you used to be shaken. This confused them. It frustrated them. It even exposed them. Because once they realized their usual strategies weren't working anymore, they had to confront a truth they weren't ready for. You had evolved beyond their reach. Your patience wasn't silence. It was emotional maturity. It was awareness. It was mastery over your reactions. They thought they were dealing with someone predictable, someone easy to sway, someone stuck in old patterns. But the new you was operating from a higher level of understanding. You saw through things you used to fall for. You recognized behaviors you once excused, and you didn't let anyone pull you back into cycles you had already healed from. In the end, what they interpreted as weakness was actually strength in its most refined form. Your evolution became the wall they couldn't climb, and the turning point they never anticipated. They were playing chess with someone who had already learned how to play a different game entirely. And that's when they realized they were completely outmatched. Number 11. The delay they mocked was the alignment they walked straight into. People love to judge what they don't understand. They see you pausing, waiting, or taking your time, and they label it as hesitation, laziness, or weakness. They mock the gap between action and reaction, assuming it's a flaw in you. What they don't realize is that this delay wasn't indecision, it was precision. You weren't moving according to their timeline because you weren't living on their level of understanding. You were waiting for everything to fall into place, exactly as it should, letting life's currents do the heavy lifting while they rushed blindly ahead. Their impatience became their own undoing. Every time they pressured, pushed, or tried to force a result, they moved out of alignment with the natural flow of consequences and opportunities. They didn't see that the space you created, the time you allowed, and the restraint you showed were all part of a larger plan they couldn't perceive. While they scrambled, acted recklessly, and assumed control, you were quietly positioning yourself at the exact point where the floor would tilt in your favor. There's a subtle genius in waiting. It gives clarity, builds perspective, and allows events to mature without interference. The people mocking you were only chasing short-term outcomes, while your patience was orchestrating long-term reality. When the alignment finally hit, it wasn't sudden or accidental. It was inevitable. Every delayed reaction, every withheld response, every measured pause contributed to a moment where life itself handed you the advantage. Now they're realizing what they thought was inactivity was actually strategy. What they assumed was hesitation was actually mastery. They mocked your timing, but your patience was the quiet force that let circumstances converge perfectly on your terms. They acted prematurely, exposed themselves, and stumbled into consequences they never expected. And all the while, You weren't late. You were simply aligned, waiting for the exact moment when everything would fall into place exactly where you needed it to be. Number 12. Your patience exposed the power imbalance they pretended didn't exist. Some people like to pretend everyone is on the same level, especially when they're benefiting from the illusion. They act as if the situation is equal, as if both sides have the same influence, the same control, the same emotional weight to carry. But patience has a way of revealing who actually holds power and who only pretends to. When you didn't rush, when you didn't panic, when you didn't fall for their urgency or pressure, the balance shifted in a way they could no longer hide. The truth is simple. The person who can wait has the advantage. Waiting means you're not threatened. It means you're not desperate. It means you're not dependent on their next move. And nothing rattles someone more than realizing the person they thought they were controlling is actually the one in control. Your patience made their behavior louder. It made their intentions clearer. And it made the gap between your strength and their insecurity impossible to ignore. They tried to act like they were steering the situation, but the moment you didn't react on command, their confidence cracked. Their attempts to manipulate started looking like flailing. Their pressure started looking like fear, and their certainty started looking like bluffing. Every moment you waited forced them to reveal another layer of truth they hoped would stay hidden. And slowly, they began to understand that they had misread everything. Your patience wasn't just emotional discipline, it was a quiet declaration of authority. You weren't controlled by the moment or their behavior or their expectations. You moved when you were ready, not when they demanded it. And that alone dismantled the entire false balance they tried to create. Now they know exactly where the power always was. It wasn't in their games or their timing or their attempts to manipulate outcomes. It was in your ability to remain steady while they kept exposing their own instability. They thought they were holding the reins, but your patience revealed that you were the one guiding the pace all along. Number 13, you letting things unfold naturally was the most strategic move you never planned. There's a different kind of power in letting life handle what ego wants to interfere with. You didn't plot, scheme, or design some calculated takedown. You simply stepped back and allowed events to move the way they were meant to. And without any effort on your part, everything started aligning in a way that exposed exactly who people were and what they intended. The beauty of this approach is that you didn't have to dirty your hands. You didn't pull strings or manipulate situations. You just allowed the truth to breathe, and it did the rest. Some traps are carefully crafted, but others build themselves. When people underestimate someone who stays grounded and refuses to play games, they often walk straight into their own consequences. They thought your restraint meant you weren't paying attention. They mistook your calm for cluelessness. They believed your refusal to retaliate made you an easy target. What they didn't realize was that your stillness created a clean environment where their actions stood out far more sharply than they intended. Every lie, every shift, every twist in their behavior became painfully obvious. The irony is that they would have been safer if you had reacted. A reaction gives them something to blame, something to twist, something to point at. But when you let things unfold naturally, the accountability stayed exactly where it belonged, with them. Without your interference, their choices boomeranged with full force. Nothing diluted the outcome. Nothing protected them from the reality they created. They stepped into the consequences as if they were walking into a room they thought you'd prepared for them, only to realize they furnished it themselves. And the best part, you didn't have to sacrifice your dignity, your values, or your peace. You stayed true to your character, while their own patterns revealed everything you needed to know. They willingly walked into the outcome they feared, not because you planned it, but because they were too busy trying to outsmart someone who wasn't even playing. In the end, letting things unfold naturally turned out to be the most strategic move you never intentionally made, and the one they never saw coming. Number 14. They're not trapped because you outplayed them. They're trapped because they misunderstood you. Some people spend their lives trying to control what they don't understand. They assume that every pause, every calm moment, every act of patience is weakness to exploit. They take your stillness as an invitation, your patience as an opportunity, and your restraint as something to manipulate. But the truth is far simpler. They misread you entirely. You weren't scheming, you weren't plotting, you didn't have to craft traps or orchestrate outcomes. You simply existed with clarity, consistency, and calm. Their misjudgment is what trapped them. In trying to force results, manipulate events, or provoke reactions, they built their own cage, brick by brick, thinking they were securing the upper hand. Every impatient move, every attempt to rush or coerce, every miscalculated act added another wall. And because you didn't respond in the ways they expected, the walls went unnoticed by you, but became impossible to ignore by them. They were constructing their own downfall in real time, unaware that the person they underestimated was simply being steady, patient, and aligned. Patience has a peculiar way of letting people reveal themselves. It doesn't punish or intervene. It simply allows life to reflect back the consequences of choices. While they acted impulsively, you observed, waited, and let reality do its work. The walls that now surround them are not the result of cunning or confrontation. They are the inevitable outcome of their own miscalculations meeting your composure. What makes this so potent is that they feel trapped without understanding why. They search for a culprit, a strategy, a hand that put them there. But the truth is that the prison exists purely because they built it themselves. Your patience was the quiet force that allowed it to solidify, the invisible witness to the construction of a consequence they cannot escape. In the end, they are caught not by your power, but by their own blindness. They mistook your patience for weakness, and in doing so, they constructed a reality from which there is no easy exit, all while you remained untouched, unshaken, and fully aware of the truth they refused to see. Conclusion. Your patience was never a pause. It was a force. Every moment you held steady, every choice you made with clarity, every act of restraint, became a silent power that exposed truth, revealed character, and allowed life to align itself perfectly in your favor. While others rushed, schemed, and manipulated, you remained anchored. Your calm dismantled their illusions. Your standards became unmovable boundaries, and your gentleness let reality deliver consequences they thought only you could assign. They weren't trapped by your actions. They were trapped by their own miscalculations, impatience, and inability to see beyond the surface of who you truly are. What they mistook for weakness was actually your evolution. What they labeled as inactivity was strategic alignment. What they feared as silence was clarity. And in the quiet power of your patience, they revealed everything they tried to hide, exposed themselves in ways they couldn't control, and walked straight into consequences they thought they'd avoid. This is the undeniable truth. Patience is not passive. Patience is dominance without chaos. It is evolution without conflict. And it is proof that the chosen ones operate on a level that others simply cannot comprehend. If this resonated with you, if you've ever felt underestimated or seen patience turn the tables in your favor, make sure to join the movement. Subscribe to the channel for more powerful insights. Like this video to amplify its message. Comment to share your experiences, and share it with those who need to see that true power often lies in stillness. Your patience is your weapon, your clarity is your armor, and your evolution is unstoppable. Stay tuned, stay aware, and always let life work in your favor. Stay blessed always.